Welcome. You're listening to the Good Girls Don't podcast with Ashley Ray
and Verity Mansfield.
This is the podcast where we smash those rules that we've been taught to follow both as men and women and burn the damn rule book. We're tackling the big issues and the issues nobody wants to talk about, and we'll be fiercely feminist about it.
This podcast is about inspiration, education, compassion, and being the change that you need to see in this world. This podcast is for the trailblazers, the freedom fighters, and the soul igniters, and all the women just like you who are ready to break the good girl rules and be heard.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of Australia and its First Nations people on which this podcast is produced and consumed. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Get ready for the revolution. It's coming to you now. It's coming to you now. You're gonna see evolution. And they'll never bring us down. No, they'll never bring us down.
Hi Verity, how are you?
Good, thanks, Ashley.
I know we're both a little bit mind blown because we just wrapped up an interview with Holly Ann Martin. Now, before we go any further with this, we are just going to put out a content warning and a trigger warning that this episode deals with some very heavy topics. And look, we are dealing with scenarios of child abuse and peer-to-peer abuse, and we want to make sure that if you're listening to this and this brings up anything for you, we want you to be supported and we want you to have help. So if this does, bring up stuff as podcasts do, they've certainly done that for me in the past, we want to urge you to contact 1-800-RESPECT or Lifeline on 13 11 14. And we want you to be aware as well that everything that we discuss in this podcast is real. It's not sensationalized. It's not hammed up for anything. These are real things that have happened in Australia and in our communities. So just brace yourselves. We'll give you a couple of seconds if you want to put your headphones on, or if you need to hit pause and listen to this at a time where it's going to be a bit more private for you.
Especially if there's any children around, listen to this content first before you share it or talk to your children about it.
Absolutely. So we'll just give you, a couple of seconds now. We'll wait. Just go put your headphones on or hit the podcast. Yeah. And come back and listen to another time. And we'll start in a couple of seconds with Verity letting us know what this is all about. So, Verity, we have Holly Ann Martin on the podcast today, but why do we have her on the podcast, and who is she, and why do we care? Like, what rules is she breaking? Why is she here?
Holly Ann Martin, I think, is an incredible rule breaker. We're talking about breaking the good girl rules. She is probably the epitome of doing this in a really controversial area of, child abuse prevention. If anyone's got to rock the boat, if anyone's using their voice to, make other people uncomfortable so that we can protect the rights, the human rights of the most vulnerable people in our society, being children, Holly Ann is it. So Holly Ann is the founder and managing director of Safe for Kids, with over 30 years experience in teaching child abuse prevention education.
That's a lot of experience.
It is. She's also delivered programs and talked about her programs, over 30 conferences, from audiences all over the world, all over this globe. So from, the United Kingdom to America, Cambodia, Indonesia, Mexico, and all the way around Australia.
Wow.
She's an incredible woman with such a passion for education and, preventing child abuse in this country.
That's incredible, and of course why we have her here.
Yeah, and she's amazing. She's not just educating parents, but she's educating and empowering children throughout the world. She's, equipping parents and teachers with tools and information to prevent child abuse. And, when we talk about child abuse, it also encompasses physical harm, and also, the cyberbullying, the inappropriate content that's available through the internet, things like porn. She's just an incredible human being, and she's here. She's in our own backyard doing this work. And something really amazing that came up in our chat with her that you will hear is the fact that she had to refinance her home to start this off. And I just think that takes guts. That is determination. That is commitment to being the change that this country needs.
It's a massive leap of faith. So, yeah, and we started off asking Holly about how Safe for Kids started. So you will hear all about that coming up on the Good Girls Don't podcast. Welcome to the Good Girls Don't podcast, Holly Ann.
Thanks for having me, girls.
Oh God,
we're
I'm so
excited.
This is a conversation I have been waiting so much to have and to listen to, and I'm so hankering to hear all of the things that you have to say, because I think I've admired your work for many, many years, and sorry, Verity, I'm hogging all of the airtime right now. No, I've seriously admired your work for so many years, and I've seen the books that you have, and the kind of work you do is, groundbreaking. I love it. It's so, so needed. So where do we even begin, Verity? There's so much to cover.
Oh, there is. But let's start with the beginning, Holly Ann. Like, how did you get involved in Safe for Kids? Like, how did this come about? How did you end up making this your thing?
I was a teacher assistant for 25 years working with children with special needs, and I was at a school where there was a volunteer bus aide was abusing kids on a special needs bus the year before I started at the school. So the principal had us all trained in protective behaviours. So for 25 years I'd been teaching it to kids that I'd worked with. But in 2007 I went up into 2 remote communities in the Kimberley because there was all over the newspaper were huge stories about child abuse. So I just saw a need for resources. So I took a huge loan out of my home, quit my job, and have been doing it full-time since 2007.
Wow. So you made that sacrifice financially yourself in order to create this almost like a revolution of teaching parents, teachers, and children about, I guess, sexual safety and the dangers of, porn and cyberbullying and everything.
Well, to be honest, when I first started in 2007, I didn't have to create resources and talk about pornography because, there was no iPads and iPhones. But, since 2007, just watching the way that technology has changed the landscape for both adults and children is really scary.
Yeah.
And because I stand in front of on average 4,500 children a year from 3 to 17, the things that children tell me frighten me, and I go, oh gosh, well, I need a resource about that. So if I need a resource to talk about it, then hopefully other people will. So that's why all the stuff that I've created, protective behaviours, and I've stopped calling it protective behaviours, to be honest, because it's so much more now with cyber safety and all of that stuff. So I call it protective education. But it came to Australia in the late 80s in the place of stranger danger, because only 4% of sexual abuse is by a stranger. But, the landscape, like I said before, is changing so fast that, even agencies that's jobs are to keep up to date, like the eSafety Commission, their resources are, they're still probably 6 months behind. And when I'm standing in front of children and they're our experts, if you need to know something, you ask a 10-year-old.
Oh, God, yes.
And, the things that children are telling me are frightening me, but they're also, they don't understand. And when when children are telling me, oh, my parents won't let me do this, that, and the other, parents need to be educated. They're banning stuff without educating around it. But children can get around filters and all of that stuff, and I'm against filters, to be honest, because it's all very well if you've got, Family Zone or whatever, but kids will go to neighbours' houses and they don't have them. So
Yeah.
my whole goal, and the reason that I'm, love this idea of the podcast, is we have to give families, parents, the language to be able to have these conversations with their children. You can't.
Yes.
Prohibition's never worked. We can't ban everything. The internet's not going anywhere. There's so much pornography, for instance, on YouTube, but when parents at workshops say, well, I'll just stop my child going on YouTube. Well, no, don't do that, because it'll just send them underground.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so true, isn't it? Like I think so many parents don't have these conversations because they don't have the language, the actual words. They don't have the confidence or the know-how to even start the conversation, whether that's because of their own fears or their own past experiences, or because it's taboo and you just don't talk to children about sex and porn, apparently, or it is the fact that they don't know the right words. They're so petrified of being the people introducing their children to porn, the concept of porn or the concept of child abuse. And we go the other way around, where we want to protect our children from it, and so we don't speak about it. But that's actually the problem.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You're exactly right. When you look at even just talking about sex with children, in Australia, we are terrible at it as a country. And you look at the research out of, the Scandinavian countries and Holland and stuff. Holland's got the lowest teen pregnancy rates in the world, but they teach sex education, from a very young age. And people think if we talk about it, it will turn them on to it. And it has quite the opposite effect. If we talk openly about it, they're less likely to have sex early. If kids know that if they come across these images by accident and they can talk to their family about it, it's so much easier, because kids, when they see pornography, they're telling me that they're having flashbacks and nightmares, but they can't talk to a parent because their parent will take their iPad away.
Yeah. Wow.
And I can imagine for a lot of kids, like, technology is such an integral part of life now, whereas, 30 years ago when I was born, mobile phones didn't really exist. At least I'm pretty sure they didn't. And now it kind of seems like kids are kind of attached to an iPad or an iPhone or something. So I can imagine that taking that away to them is, feeling like it's, I'm not going to say life-threatening, but it's taking away a core need.
You're exactly right, Ash. And, most parents didn't grow up with the internet. And so adults think of the real world and cyberspace as two separate places.
Yeah.
Children have never known a world without it. So if you say, clean your room or I'll take your iPad away, or stop fighting with your brother or sister or I'll take your iPad away, you may as well say I'm going to chop off your left arm. Because
I'm going to take your entire world away.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, one of the things that I ask parents to do is not use technology as a behaviour management tool. Unless it's, if they're going on it for too much, then, have some boundaries around that. But by, threatening to take away their iPad if they don't clean their room, if they see porn, they are definitely not going to tell you, because if you're going to just take it away for not cleaning your room, and if I see something bad, it's definitely gone.
Wow.
And, they're just simple things, but parents really need to, educate themselves around this. And they really, I'll go back to YouTube. YouTube is such a huge babysitter, and yet parents really don't know what their children are seeing on YouTube. And there's even YouTube for kids isn't 100% safe. I've seen on YouTube for kids a video where Peppa Pig's dancing across the screen and then Mickey Mouse is dancing across the screen, and there's this sort of la 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 in the background, but the next scene is of a mouse blowing its brains out, but in the background is still la la la. So if a parent's just listening, they're not going to know what their child has seen. Dr. Christy Goodwin.
So sneaky.
Well, Dr. Christy Goodwin, who's one of our most renowned experts in Australia around cyber safety, and she's a scientist, so she talks about the science around addiction and stuff. She's seen on YouTube for kids where somebody has, halfway through the video, inserted a real-life beheading.
Oh, you're kidding?
No. And then I was saying this at a parent workshop that I was doing back in May, and a mum came up afterwards and said, Holly, I have seen on YouTube for Kids where Peppa Pig, right at the end of the video, goes, I feel hungry, I feel like some bacon, and gets a knife and starts slicing off her skin off her arm and starts eating that. And that's on YouTube for Kids. Now, every 3-year-old, you'll go out to dinner and every 3-year-old is sitting at the table at the restaurant watching YouTube for Kids.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm just thinking, like, seeing such violence must instill some sort of vicarious trauma for these kids.
Yes, definitely. And that's what I mean about the flashbacks and the nightmares that they're having, but they can't articulate it because their parents haven't given them permission to articulate what they're seeing.
Yeah, but also they're so young, they're not developed enough to have that kind of a thought process.
No, exactly. It's really, really frightening. And, parents, unless you're, I'm not for banning it, but I say to parents, you need to be sat side by side with your child, and every kid wants to watch, unboxing videos or, stupid people playing Minecraft or whatever.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you need to be sat next to your child. It's almost like reading them every night. So maybe on a Saturday morning from 11 till 12 or 11 till 11:30, it's your YouTube time, but you need to be sat next to your child because the content is so horrendous.
Yeah, it really is. So what's the best way as parents that we can educate our children about porn and keep them safe? Like, what do parents need to do? Like, how do they even educate themselves into having these conversations?
Well, I basically, I believe that we need to start having this conversation by 6 at the latest.
Wow, 6 years old.
6-year-olds, I know. When I say that at workshops, parents go, what the hell? And I actually shared on my Facebook page recently a story, and then I said, and that's why to justify it, I said, and that's why I believe that we need to start this conversation at this age. And I wrote 2 books to help parents have that conversation. And this awful troll got on and wrote, oh, you're just beating this up, which is a terrible analogy when you're talking about porn anyway, but you're just beating all this up just to flog your books. So once I blocked her and deleted what she'd said, I wish I didn't have to write children's books about talking about pornography, but the reality is I do, and it has to start at 6. So I simply say to children, if you see pictures or movies with people with no clothes on, I need you to tell a grown-up. And when I'm doing this in class with the children, I either have an iPad or have a book that I pretend's an iPad. And I say to the children, if I typed in fairies, but a picture of a lady with no clothes on and big fairy wings came up, what would you do? Now, I had a delightful little boy go once, oh, I'd type in fairies with clothes on, miss. Like, really new. I just love how young fellas sing. But I explain to children, if it's an iPad, I need you to flip it over. And then I do some brain science with children. So I get my fingers together to make my hands about the size of a child's brain. And I explain to the children that your brains are still growing. You know how we have to put healthy food into our body to grow up big and strong? We need to put healthy pictures into our mind to grow up big and strong. And, seeing pictures or movies with people with no clothes on isn't healthy for your brain. And then I get my fingers and I sort of touch my fingertips together. And then I say, in your brain, you've got all of these connections, millions and millions of connections. And then I turn one hand the opposite way and describe, if you see pictures or movies, it actually changes the connections in your brain. So by flipping my hand over, I say it changes those connections. And kids eat this stuff up. They love brain science stuff. And I also explain to them that it releases a chemical in our brain called dopamine. There are other chemicals that it releases too, but I don't want to overload them, so I just talk about the dopamine. And I say it releases this chemical called dopamine. Now, if you're running around, your brain will create a little bit of dopamine to say, hey, keep running around. I like that feeling. Or if you eat chocolate, a little bit of dopamine to say, keep eating chocolate. But if you see pictures or movies with people with no clothes on, it's like a flood or a tsunami, whatever that you think the kids will understand. But it's like a flood of this dopamine in your brain. But it's not healthy for your brain. But that's what you can become addicted to. And then I talk to the kids about, what can you become addicted to? And they all know drinking and marijuana and all that sort of stuff. And I say that chemical is released when we have that, gambling and that sort of thing. So it's not healthy for children's brains. And the kids really understand it. And I've had so many parents contact me to say, Holly, my child came home after having your lesson and told me how they had seen pornography. But here for the first time was this nice lady talking about this. And I was here in a Perth, because I'm in Perth, at a school, and I had 32 7-year-olds. And when we're talking about where can you see private pictures or private movies, the kids could all tell me on iPhones, on iPads, on YouTube always comes up. TikTok is now coming up, Snapchat. I had a 5-year-old once tell me when I said, where can you see private pictures? A 5-year-old said Snapchat. And I said, sweetie, you're 5. How do you know about Snapchat? Oh, because my big sister's using it?
Yeah.
Obviously I'm sending nudes, because how would a 5-year-old know that? But anyway, back to this class. So at the end of my lesson, we've talked all about what you should do if you see these private pictures. The lesson's over, so I'm standing in the doorway letting these 32 children, these 32 7-year-olds go outside to play. 8 children stayed behind, and I've said, come on, off you go. I want to go and get a cup of tea. Off you go. No, miss, we need to see you. And each came up to me individually telling me how they'd seen pornography on YouTube. 8 of 32, that's a quarter of 7-year-olds.
Wow.
In one class. And not one child had told a parent for either having the fear of having the device taken away or getting into trouble. And I've just gone, this is not okay. This is why we have to get this message out far and wide, because there was nothing special about this school. It was just an average school in an average suburban, it wasn't high socioeconomic, low, it was just average. And so I know it's a very small, 8 out of 32 is a small, sample. But I can't imagine it being any different in any other class.
That's a lot, though,
Yeah.
for school. I mean, and schools are going to vary in size. I mean, the school that my brothers go to is one of the largest schools in their community, and they have hundreds of children per year level. And I can just imagine if that percentage carried over, that's probably close to 80 children just in one of my brother's year levels who would have been exposed. Like, that's a lot of kids.
Yes.
Oh my
Big.
God.
I remember from my own childhood, I think I must have been about maybe 14, and I slept over at a friend's house, and there was a number of us all sleeping over in the lounge room, and she found her mother's porn collection. And I remember being on the mattress on the floor and having my head under the doona, just like going, oh my God, like being so horrified by what I was seeing. And there weren't any parents around. I never told anyone. And it was the porn video was of a woman giving, oral sex to a donkey. And I was just like in such horrific shock. And I was the only child that didn't want to be watching this. And there wasn't anywhere for me to go. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't leave because it was like, 10 o'clock at night. We didn't have mobile phones, so I couldn't contact my parents. And even when I got home the next day, I never said anything. Like, I never even, there was no education about what children should do or who children can talk to about these things. It's, and I think this is such an important conversation to have. Because
Definitely.
we don't want to create either, children who are going to grow up into adults who are being misinformed about sexual experiences around porn, or who have trauma around, sex as they're growing up, or who have repressed ideas about sex and fears about sex. And I remember, Holly, and from a previous conversation, you said to me that after one of your workshops with the children, that a little girl had said to you, I never want to have sex.
Yes, yeah. And I'm hearing that more and more. So many things that you've just said have triggered things that I need to tell you about. But
go for it. Tell us, Holly Ann. Tell us.
Go for it. Open the floodgate.
Well, back to you know, what you had seen at 14, imagine seeing that at 6. There is, so everybody's heard of YouTube, but not many people know about RedTube, and less people know about this next thing that I'm going to tell you, which is very confronting. But we have kids in grade 4 knowing about this next thing, and they're learning about it from a show called Family Guy. And so that's an adult cartoon, but many children are allowed to watch it. So imagine the cartoon characters go and blah, 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 and then on ZooTube, kids are going to go ZooTube. They're going to Google it. They're going to hit search. 9 boxes are going to open up with people having sex with animals.
Oh my God.
So whereas you had to go,
visceral response to that.
You saw it on a VCR in the olden days.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are 9 boxes with the videos rolling already. There is no, are you 18? This is adult content. There is no warning. If kids in grade 4 are talking about this, kids in grade 1 are going to hear it in the playground. I had a teacher recently, when I explained this, talked about this at a teacher training session. One teacher came up to me at the end and said, Holly, I was out on duty last week and I heard the kids talking about ZooTube, and I just thought it was about something about animals, and I continued my duty. I had no idea. But we have Zootopia 2 coming out this year. So imagine the grade 1s hear Zoo something or other. It's easier to spell ZooTube than Zootopia.
Yeah.
I can just imagine kids getting that, you know, only remembering one of those words at the end of the day, coming home and putting that into the Google, and boom, there it is. Like, oh my God, okay, I've got to ask a question. I have questions.
Go.
All of these things, what happens to kids? I mean, we say that, you know, there are kids who say, I don't want to have sex ever, or they feel really uncomfortable, but what's the impact on kids sort of, I suppose, what does this do to kids to see this stuff? Like, what's the consequence of us not doing any of these protective behaviours or having these conversations?
Well, unfortunately, Ash, it's people, kids touching other kids to try and, you know, normalise it. Child-to-child sex abuse is on the increase hugely.
Yes.
We actually don't have, unfortunately, a true record, because if children are under the age of 10, sometimes it's not a police matter, so police aren't keeping a record of it. Sometimes if it is reported to the Department for Child Protection, you know, they might investigate and things like that. But in my experience, what's usually happening is parents hear about their child being touched by another child at school. They report it to the principal. Principals are either saying, oh, that's normal behaviour for children that age, or that couldn't possibly happen because we supervise the children too well, or they're just not doing anything about it. And I'm not talking about just you show me yours, I'll show you mine, which is in fact normal child development. That's okay. We are talking about either digital penetration or oral sex.
Yeah. Can I interrupt you, Holly?
Sorry?
Can I just interrupt you?
No, yeah.
There was, we have we know of a family in this household or this household knows of a family outside of this household, and their daughter was being raped and sexually abused for years, and the only way they found out was because another family from the school that this young girl was attending had reported that she had given their son oral sex in the school toilets. And that's when the family started going, well, hang on a second, how does she know about this? And then they found out that an extended family member of this young girl had been raping her for over a decade.
Yeah.
And she didn't know anything wrong. She didn't understand that it wasn't right. For her, it was so normal. So when she wanted to, when she liked this other little boy, it just seemed like as normal as giving him a kiss on the cheek.
And that's why every school in our country has to teach. Some may call it protective behaviours, or I call it protective education, but every school is expected to teach this to children, because it gives kids clear boundaries that nobody's allowed to touch your private parts. You're not allowed to touch anybody else's private parts. in my experience, if schools are doing anything, they're doing, doing a very superficial,
Yes.
about early warning signs and safety team. But I'm going to challenge every parent that listens to this to go to their child's school and say, is my child learning either protective behaviours or protective education? Are you talking to them about pornography and child-to-child sexual abuse? And if not, why the hell not? Because it has to be taught. And, parents will say, teachers will say, it's parents' jobs. And ideally it will be parents' jobs. But, parents like you would be talking to your children about this sort of stuff. We've already had conversations and, you are talking to your girls about this. And Ashley, you'll be talking to your sisters about this.
Oh, yes.
But
Especially today.
They're both going to get a text message after this.
but most parents, don't talk to their kids about this. And so it has to be school, home, and as a community, we need to be talking more openly about this stuff.
And this is why we so wanted to talk to you, Holly Ann, because this is the whole idea behind the Good Girls Don't podcast, is we need to have these icky, uncomfortable conversations. We have to stop sweeping things under the rug. We have to stop thinking, well, somebody else will talk to my child about it. I was listening to an interview yesterday where this guy was saying all his dad taught him about protective sex was, hey, son, did you have sex last night? Yes, Dad, I did. Did you enjoy it? Yes, Dad, I did. Are you going to do it again, son? Yes, Dad, I am. Okay, put a condom on it. That was all he got taught. And he said as he grew up, his parents were kind of like, well, I thought your dad would have taught you. He's got a penis. And the dad was like, well, I thought that was mum's job. And so he didn't get any. And he now actually, ironically does have a business in as a sex coach, which is brilliant. But yeah, it's like we're not talking, like no one's talking to their kids. And I've spoken to, as a single mother, I get to speak to a lot of single fathers and even just, talking about these issues. And all the men are like, what? Like what do we have to teach our boys? Like they're not teaching their boys about porn at all.
No.
They're not having that conversation. And most men don't even think that porn is wrong in the first place. They think porn is a really healthy part of a man's sexuality.
Well, when I'm working with 14-year-old young men in schools, they admit to me of watching at least 2 hours a week of pornography.
2 hours a
That's
week.
a lot.
At least. And when I say, fellas, why would young men look at that stuff? Oh, to learn technique, miss, to learn style.
Oh.
And I say, let me stop you right there, because that's not the right technique and there's no style. But there's no kissing, there's no foreplay, there's no consent. We need to teach consent from babies.
Yes.
And teaching children body autonomy and stuff like that, because kids are learning about, because we're doing such a bad job at teaching about sex education, we do all, in most schools, in my experience, all we ever do is STIs and unwanted pregnancies. But nobody's doing pleasure for women and all of that stuff. And pornography is feeding into that because, it's all about the fella and, I know when you talk with Catherine, she would have really blown you out of the water with some of the stuff that she would have talked about.
She did.
But there is 88% of a pornographic movie is violence against women. And in every pornographic movie, there is a certain sex act that you need a lot of consent around. And because I don't know your audience, I'm going to be quite tame.
Oh, no. Holly, you can say anything. If you're talking about anal sex, go for it.
I will.
We don't know. We're not into.
We have an explicit rating for a reason.
Well, every teenage young person thinks that that's totally normal. And I don't put my middle-class white values on it and say, well, don't play in a sewer, because that's just how I feel. But I say to the young people, if you choose to do that, then, we're not explaining that in those movies, it doesn't go from one orifice into another orifice without washing and things like that. Now, I was dropping off some of my parent handbooks at PMH Hospital, which is our children's hospital here. They have a child abuse unit, and every parent that goes through their child gets my book, sort of thing. So I was dropping some off, and the head psychologist was telling me that she is seeing 2 14-year-olds a week that have gone to a party, a boy's forced them into anal sex without, has just done it.
Oh,
These girls will not have a normal bowel action for the rest of their lives because they're being that badly damaged.
that is horrific.
And so we are leaving these young people open to all of this stuff. But when I say to the fellas about, and these young men, boys don't have a filter. I love working with 14-year-old young fellas because they just tell you stuff and they're just so blunt and open and honest. And they were describing the most heinous acts, and I won't describe them because they really were heinous, but all they could say is, Holly, it's just so funny. So I had to say to them, yeah. And it was a lot worse than just animals and things, but what they were saying. And I had to say to these young fellas, that's somebody's sister, that's somebody's daughter. I said to these young men, how much do you think a porn star's paid? And these young fellas said, $1 million, miss, $500,000, miss. I said, would it surprise you to know, and as feminists, I know you will be surprised by this, Catherine might have already told you, but the porn industry is the only industry in the world where women are actually paid more than men.
So they should. They're the ones receiving all the crap.
But get this, they get paid $1,000 per movie.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's nothing for what they go through.
And I said to these young fellas, what do you think they do with that $1,000 per movie? And this one young fella goes, buy costumes. And I said, buddy, I don't know what you're watching, but the stuff I know about, there aren't too many costumes. But that money actually either goes up their nose or in their arm. And so I just went, to town on these young fellas because I said we'd talk about anything. So this is what we ended up talking about.
Yeah.
But, the average career of a porn star is 3 months. The average lifespan of a porn star is 35 because most
That
of
is
them
crazy.
die by suicide because or drug overdoses and stuff like that. So people need to get real about, the glamour, people glamorize the porn industry and things like that. Yes, some people do choose to go down that track, but most don't. Most are trafficked into it. They're tricked. They sign up to do a certain thing, but then, these young 18-year-olds from the Bible Belt in America who go to, LA or wherever to make these movies, they're tricked into doing a lot of this stuff. And more people are actually making their own, which is RedTube, making their own, sex videos and uploading them to RedTube and stuff. But people, and people talk about ethical porn, and I don't know if Catherine talked about it, but there is nothing ethical about porn. It is filling a market. But the problem is because our brains are wired for excitement and novelty, people have to watch sicker and sicker stuff to get the same excitement. And we have 17-year-olds with erectile dysfunction, which I'm sure Catherine talked about.
Yeah, she did.
That literally just blew my mind to hear that and go, oh my God. And, all of that happening before they've had a date.
Even before they've had sex, yeah.
Before they've had their first kiss or first small intimacy with someone else, like that honestly blew my mind because I have 2 young brothers and I'm sitting there going, please, no, I don't want this to happen.
But it's also what these boys are learning from society because no one's talking about this stuff like you are, Holly-Ann, that, they're seeing humiliation as a way of humor, as a way of entertainment. They're seeing the dehumanization of females around them as objects for them to humiliate for their personal entertainment. Like, that's just fucking sick as it is. Like,
and these 14-year-olds in 10 years are going to be our future police, doctors, nurses and parents. And they're being so desensitized to this sort of stuff, and they're just seeing women as an orifice or, something that you do something to.
yeah.
But also on the other, it's not only boys that are watching it, girls are watching it too, and, are just so porn ready. When you hear stories like the Women's Weekly did a story about 12-year-olds having a bazillion. Now, if the Women's Weekly do a story about that, it's pretty mainstream.
That is crazy.
They're pretty, they don't normally talk too out there. But, I mean, at 12, you don't even have enough hair. But where does that come from? It's all porn culture.
But even what are we teaching our young girls? That their body is something to be ashamed about, that what they were given as natural part of their body is something that is wrong. There's something wrong naturally with them because they've got pubic hair.
And you have to modify it to please other people.
And the fact that nobody's explaining it, it's there for your protection. It's there for cushioning. It's there for, to keep your, your vagina clean, basically, to stop things getting in it.
Yeah, like a filter.
Nobody's explaining all this. And, it's so dirty. It's so filthy having. No, it's not. It's perfectly natural. But, schools are not doing anything about it. Parents just don't know how to have these conversations. So, it is no wonder that young people are turning to the internet, but the stuff they're seeing, when parents, like you talked about that, seeing that woman with the donkey, and that's quite extreme. Most of, you're much younger than me, but when most people think of pornography, adults I'm talking about, they think of, the magazine under the big brother's bed or, that sort of stuff. They're not thinking of the violence, penetration, the choking, all of that stuff that's in the porn now. And I was talking to some women that run a women's shelter, and they're saying that every woman now that's coming in that's being raped, choking is part of it. And 5 years ago, it wasn't part. That's not, they've seen a big change in trends of, the anal sex and the choking and all stuff like this. And it's just, the whole culture around this stuff is so normalised that,
it's scary.
Having seen the change in the last 7 years, when I think about the next 7 or to 10 years, I just can't imagine where it's all going to end up.
Well,
but
I think
for
this
me,
is the
education.
problem.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think this is a problem, Holly-Ann, because I've just turned 40. I've been a single parent for the last decade, and I've dated quite a fair bit. And, it's really interesting dating different men and having these conversations and even my own experiences where you said, like, men think that choking, is a bit of fun, or that anal sex is expected. It's not even a conversation. Or what was the other one that popped up in my head before from a past experience? Oh, of guys being like, can I tie you up? And you're like, what the hell? Like, there's no intimacy. There are so many men out there. And we're talking men who are already in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, fully grown men who are raising these children who are in our schools now. The men already have these warped ideas of intimacy, of sex, of consent. Like, they do not get it. So how the hell are we expecting parents today to be able to even guide children? Like, if this is what men who now in their 40s and 50s are expecting as normal, and they grew up with, Playboy magazine as their only form of porn, and now we're having 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds having access to graphic video porn, like, holy shit, like, how damaged are these children going to be when they hit their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s? And how much worse is it going to get when their children have even, God knows how much worse, porn, how much, more graphic porn will be, in 10 years' time? Like, something needs to stop. Like, we seriously need to stop putting our heads in the sand, pretending that these issues do not exist, and start having conversations and encouraging people to say, no, this is not right, it is not acceptable, and this is not the world we want our children to grow up in. Exactly. And we need to be saying to both men and women that these behaviours are not acceptable. Like, and to be able to say no in the bedroom or before the bedroom, or to be able to have the confidence to talk about sex before you're having sex with someone. Most people will go on a date and then they'll start kissing, and then they'll go maybe on another date, and then at some point when they've decided to have sex, they've not even talked about what their standards or norms are for them in the bedroom, or what the deal breakers are in the bedroom. Like, they'll just go straight into the activity, the sexual activity, without any conversation about where their boundaries lie.
Exactly. And even I've got a girlfriend who's 65 who's back in the dating scene, and she said even, men her age are expecting her to do anal sex, and she's just going, are you kidding me?
Yeah, are you fucking kidding me? No.
Oh, my goodness.
And the men that aren't even... Well, yeah, but, Holly Ann said something really important before. There are adult men in this world now who do understand that you can't shove your penis in a vagina, in an anus, and back into a vagina. It is so toxic, like the bacteria. You can't do that. Men are not educated even about hygiene. I mean, I know enough men that don't even wash their hands after going to the toilet. You know,
it's an ongoing problem.
There's just so much of the conversations we need to have around this stuff, and men are getting so much information from porn because no one's having these conversations, and girls as well. I mean, I was speaking to a lady yesterday who was telling me about this horrific story of a young girl who's obviously already been programmed with, you know, societal norms around sex and what she should be doing with her body. She'd stolen her parents' credit card, got onto a dating platform, met a guy who was 19, and then ended up having, you know, they ended up talking online, and then they ended up, I don't know if they'd met, but she ended up sending him nude photos of herself because that's what's expected, right?
Yep.
And then he did not send anything. He did not ask for anything. He apparently is a very, very shy boy. This was the first time he'd even thought about dating or girls at 19 years old. So he was very, you know, naive and uneducated. And anyway, the parents found out about what was going on their 17-year-old daughter's phone, saw the nude photos she'd sent this boy, contacted the family. He, at 19, did not know, because she'd stolen her credit card and lied about her age. He had no idea that she was underage. He now is classified as a sexual predator for life.
Yeah.
It is illegal for anyone under 18 years old to send a naked photo of themselves and to receive one. It is illegal, and if you were caught, you will be classified. Whether you didn't know the age of the person or not, you will be classified for life as a sexual predator. You cannot travel overseas. You're going to have issues when you go for your driver's license. It is going to affect and destroy their lives. And if they release lists to the public of sexual predators in your neighborhood, that child's name, that boy's name, is going to be on that list for life. And he didn't do anything wrong apart from, he didn't do anything wrong. There wasn't anything. What are you meant to do? Ask for a driver's license, you know, whenever you meet someone. You know, boys can as much be victims of, you know, this as much as what girls can, you know, and both these. But, you know, this 17-year-old girl is also a victim of all of this, you know, because we're not educating our daughters, we're not educating our sons, and both are suffering.
Exactly. And, you know, people don't realise the ramifications. And, you know, there's been the government, one of their platforms was to have a sex offender register. And this freaks out a lot of people, but I am in fact against a sex offender register because I believe, like that young fellow, there'll be people caught on it that are innocent, but also if people get the sex offender register and go, oh great, I've got no pedophiles in my street, we don't need to talk about this with my children. Unfortunately, 45% of child-to-child sexual abuse of children, 45% is child to child. They're not going to be on a sex offender register. And I have had that many, because I've come out publicly in the paper a couple of times saying that, and I've had that many people abuse me saying, how dare you say that, you know, you're just a pedophile lover and all this, that and the other. I'm not. I'm a child. You know, I care about children, and I believe that register will be to the detriment of children, because all of this stuff that we've spoken about today, the only way forward is education.
Definitely. And we know that, and we'll accept that in other areas, you know, that education is empowerment. Education is empowerment. You hear it all the time. But when it comes to sex, no one wants to talk to their child about sex. And you hear the parents and, you know, coming home, and I speak to a lot of mums. I've got a child in primary school and a child in high school. And all the parents have a good laugh over their cups of coffee that, oh my God, you know, my child's doing sex ed this week, and we've got to read all this stuff to them, and I'm just kind of reading it as fast as I can and putting the book down or putting the information down. Like, the parents are just going, okay, so this is oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying this to my child, blah, 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 blah. They're reading off a piece of paper, and then they're like, okay, good, done, okay, bye. Like the parents are freaking out. The parents don't have enough emotional intelligence to talk about this to their kids.
Yeah.
I got to add my 2 cents. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm going to butt in and steal some airtime. Back to that sex offender thing, the register. I just want to say, from a victim perspective, if lots of sex offences are committed by people that are known to the victim and their family. So if you're naming names, you're potentially putting victims and their families at risk by association.
Yes.
And that's really dangerous as well. That can also be really horrific if that gets out, gets into the media, depending on the situation and what's happened. That's really, really dangerous. So I'm quite against that going public. I'm quite okay with having a register that stays private with police. I have someone on the register because I press charges against them, and I think they need to be on there because they shouldn't be allowed to go out and do certain things anymore, and they should be supervised in that way. It's been a really positive experience for me to have someone on there. And in terms of, oh my God, I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. I had a really, really good point. I had a really good thing to say, and I've completely forgotten because I was so like, oh my God, this is mind food. This is what the question I was going to ask. We're talking about, parents. I don't want to leave parents who might be listening feeling like they're shit people. I don't want parents listening going, oh my God, I'm the worst because I haven't spoken to my kid about this. And the ramifications are really, really high, as we've just learned. My mind is still boggling at that. But, there are parents who really will struggle to have these conversations. And if it's not mum and dad's job to talk to their kids about it, then whose is it? Can other people have these conversations with kids, like other family members, family friends? I mean, are other people allowed to step in and have these conversations or not?
Definitely, Ash. One of the things that I recommend that all kids have is a safety team of 5 people that they can talk to. And how I do this is we use the hand. So on the thumb would be anybody from the children's home, and then they have 2 people from school and then 2 people from the community. So those can be aunts and uncles and grandparents, next door neighbours, sports coaches, people from church, just any other friends of theirs or their friends' parents. But it's for parents to help their child have those conversations. I don't have children of my own, but I have lots of nieces and nephews and quite a few great nieces and nephews. And I'm the cool aunt, and I'm the one that, if you want to tell Auntie, want to tell somebody, you go and tell Auntie Holly. And so it's for, if parents are having trouble having those conversations, find a cool aunt, find out if children are learning about this at school. It was said that it takes a village to raise a child, and I wholeheartedly believe that. But we need to, find the right people for children. And so that's why I need the parents listening to this to go to their school and find out what is being taught at the school, so that they can fill in any gaps or find other agencies. Like I usually get called into schools after there's always a critical incident. Nobody's ever been proactive. And so it's always usually, lately, it's usually 6-year-old boys caught in the boys' toilet trying to get other boys to suck their penis, to be honest, because of pornography. But, schools have to play their part. Aunts and uncles have to play their part. There are so many, good places for parents to go to get the most up-to-date. One of the places to go is the eSafety Commission's website. So we were talking very early on in this podcast about TikTok. Go there and educate yourself around that sort of stuff. For me, though, the best organisation I've come across is a thing called Common Sense Media. It's an American company, a bit like myself. They do cyber, I do abuse prevention education. But they've made it their job to, the second an app comes out, they go in, they investigate, but they give a very good overview of not just ban it and get your kids off it. They say, these are the pros, these are the cons, these are the And so parents really need to take a bigger role in their child's life. You know, I don't envy parents nowadays, and I don't want parents listening to this thinking that, they're shit either. Nobody want a parent in this day and age, because when we were parented, there was no technology around.
Yeah.
But parents need to step up and realise that every weirdo in the world gets to come into their child's bedroom. When I'm working with a class of grade 3s, so they're 8 and 9, half of a class admit to me that they go online when their parents are asleep.
Wow.
So that means every crazy in the world is coming into their bedrooms. Now, no parent would drop their kid off at a strip joint at, 10 o'clock at night and say, I'll pick you up in an hour. And yet kids are going online even during the day and seeing this weird stuff. Or, nobody lets their kid go down to the park now to play by themselves. And yet have an iPad for an hour by themselves.
Yeah.
So parents, I don't want them bashing themselves up about it. You don't know what you don't know. But after listening to this podcast,
you do know.
Yes. So please get educated around this stuff, because, otherwise your children are going to be parenting your grandchildren in a world where I can't even imagine what it's going to be like.
And I think that's the important thing. Like, how much do you want the outside world to be parenting your child around sex? Like, wouldn't you rather be the empowered parent who is choosing and being able to filter that information for your child, and you being the one who gauges, what your child is ready, what's appropriate for your child to learn, instead of sending them off at such a vulnerable age, like maybe as an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old child into the wide world, and letting that world dictate your child's sexual learning.
Yep. Well, it's like being brought up by wolves, really.
Yeah. Or children, I think there's also a real danger as well about children who are educating other children around sex. And that is really scary. So even if there's nothing physical going on, when we're talking about that peer on peer, there's still the really big issue that children are teaching other children about sex. Children are telling children what's normal, and it's highly probably incorrect. Children shouldn't be the ones who are educating your child about sex. They're children.
Exactly. And the big thing is, think back to when your child believed in Santa. And there was always that one little toad that wanted to tell all the other kids in the class, there's no such thing as Santa. Yeah. There was always going to be that one child that's, wants to blow the whole class out of the water. And like I did a workshop recently for police, and I said to the police that you have to have, this conversation when your child is 6 about pornography. And there was a female officer in the room, and she's gone, oh, my, no way, Holly. But she said that Friday afternoon she went home and she talked to her 6-year-old about, have you seen pictures or movies of people with no clothes on? And ironically, that very day, a little boy in grade 1, 6-year-old, said to the whole class, oh, I saw this video where you have to kiss a lady's vagina, but there was no hair on the vagina because nobody likes a hairy vagina. And she was just freaked out. So on the Monday, she was working, so she couldn't contact the school. Monday night, she has another conversation with her daughter, because that 6-year-old, because the kids were so grossed out about it and wouldn't believe him, he brought mum's phone to school to show everybody the man kissing the lady's vagina with no hair on it. And when she took the day off on the Tuesday to go in to see the school, the principal said, we can't control what children bring to school.
Wow.
End of story. No education, no anything. I'm hearing stories like this on a weekly basis, unfortunately.
I really have this thing where I think everything needs to happen in the school, because it's such a community hub, and you have all the kids there and you have pillars of the community involved with schools. But at the same time, I also have this weird thing where I think I don't want to put that on your normal classroom teacher, because they have so much already to do in their role. It really needs to be someone else's job to come in and run classes on this, which is why we have Holly. And we're going to clone her.
and put it into every school in Australia.
But Ash, it's not even on the government's, why do I have to take a huge loan out of my home to produce all this? It's not on our government's radar to, I met with the Prime Minister last August. 2 weeks later he was sacked, but that's beside the point. It's not even that England and New Zealand are the only two countries in the world that are even taking this porn problem really seriously. Our politicians, until somebody shows our Prime Minister's two daughters pornography, it's not going to be on their radar.
Wow.
Schools, unless they have a critical incident, it's not on their radar.
But I think this whole goes back as well to Australia being very, we live in a very, misogynist community, and we really have to understand this. And our politicians, like the amount of sexism in Parliament, what possible, like, how will we possibly get this stuff done if our own politicians, are acting like sexist pigs? If they don't understand this stuff, if they're watching porn, like, they're not going to get this. And this is why we need more women in Parliament, to be able to balance that, so that, like, men don't understand, anything that hasn't happened to them. So, and they only know what they know. And so it's just so important, to have these conversations. Like, if we can't always change things and expect politicians to change things, then it falls upon us, every single person in our community, every single parent, everyone who listens to this podcast, to have these conversations, in their community, with their partner, with their children, with their brothers, with their sisters, with their best friends, with their work colleagues. And yet it gets uncomfortable, but we can't keep expecting our politicians to fix things, because one, they are always going to think something else is more important. And usually the economy will always come first.
Oh God, yes. Don't even go there, because they'll start be like, oh, it's all about.
That's a whole new podcast, Ashley.
Yep. Oh my God, that is such another topic. Holly, I am, like I said at the start of this, I'm so excited by the work that you do, and at the same time, there's like a little bit of me that's a little bit sad that this kind of work is necessary and that we're so desperate for it. That part is a little bit sad, but I kind of want to know more about specifically what you do, because I'm sure that people listening, especially parents, are going to be like, how do we get a Holly in our school? How does this work?
Well, I've written a whole curriculum because I believe that abuse prevention education needs to start at 3. So I wrote a whole curriculum for childcare centres. I've written it so an 18-year-old can deliver it to 3-year-olds, and that's simply teaching kids, the correct anatomical names for their bodies, and about having a safety team, and it's just fun, and there's lots of songs and dancing and things. And then, I've written 5 children's books. The first one is about unwanted touching. The second one is about how to teach about public and private, because even a lot of teachers can't say penis and vagina. So I wrote a book which is exactly the way that I run the lesson with children is how I've written the whole book. Then I had to write a book to help. It's a follow-on from that one, and it talks about private pictures and private movies. It's to talk about how to have the conversation about pornography without it being scary and frightening. Then I had to write a book about child-to-child sex abuse, because I've had so many principals ring me that have had critical incidents in their school and they don't know how to talk about it. And then my latest book is about cyber safety, and it encompasses all, pornography, but also kids talking to people on different apps, and not to type in, sex into computer, because, think back to when, we were all children. You're both much younger than me, but I bet even you looked up sex in a dictionary, and now, Google's the new dictionary.
And all the other swear words.
But so, because I can't be in every school and every childcare centre, I've tried to create resources for both parents and teachers to just pick up my book. In the back of the book is all of this information about, how to use the book they're not storybooks. I don't want parents just to read the book and then put it down.
Yeah.
Then open up conversations. And I've also been really fortunate this year to have worked in 5 remote Aboriginal communities where we've made songs with the children. Well, the children we've helped the children write their own songs. And so we've got a song about consent, which actually family planning down in Victoria want to use as part of their grade 6 lesson plans, which we're thrilled about. Creating songs with the good messages, about having a safety team, and if people don't listen, to keep telling and things like that. So I'm just trying to create resources to help, like I said, both parents and teachers have these conversations. And my point about the government was, there is no funding for this sort of stuff. I do a lot of work in remote communities across Australia, and schools get me in out of their own budgets, which isn't right. Schools shouldn't have to take money away from children to get me in. I mean, they do, because they believe in the program so much, and we've had so many successes and convictions because of my program. But, there are lots of programs out there that are supposed to be run in schools, but they're very comfortable. And, unfortunately, we have to start getting a bit more uncomfortable and have these conversations about, each state has their own protected behaviours program, supposedly. But, I say, unless you're talking about pornography and child-to-child sexual abuse, then you're faffing about, and you have to start getting real.
And that's so true. I remember our sex education was literally about STDs, how to put a condom on a banana, and I think that was pretty much it. There wasn't any conversation about sexual abuse. There was no conversation about porn. There was no conversation about consent, or rape or date rape. No one's having these conversations. And I think as well, when we look at porn, we really need to just highlight the music industry, because my daughter was in she was at school a couple of weeks ago, and the maths teacher had walked out the room, and all the little boys, well, they're 7-year-old, they're in year 7, so they're 12, 13, started singing this rap song about, I can't remember the name of the song is, but something down Tatiana. Something like Thrust Down Tatiana or something like that. And Olivia came home really upset and in tears, and she was like, Mum, like, this happened today and I don't feel good about it and I don't really understand it. So we Googled the lyrics, and it was literally about gang banging a prostitute and all the sexual acts that she performs. So if you can imagine a classroom filled with 30 kids, at least half of those being boys, all singing this song at the top of their voices, and then these other 15 girls having to be subjected to being humiliated, to being ashamed, to feeling so small and powerless, as they sit here and listen to a group of boys singing about gangbanging a prostitute and all of the sexual gratification that they're getting from it. Like, pornography isn't just in the movies, it's all around us, and the music industry, I think, is rife with these pornographic, kind of lyrics and images and connotations. I had a 7-year-old the other day singing about what he wants to do with his anaconda, because he was listening to that stupid song in the 80s that came out, or the 90s, sorry. I like big butts and I cannot lie. And we all thought it was a funny song at the time. But when we're listening to 7-year-olds talking about what they want to do with their anaconda, we're sending children such horrible, horrible messages. We're sending young girls horrible, horrible messages that's affecting their self-worth, their idea of themselves, that are diminishing them in personal power. And we're teaching boys that girls are just objects, and that they don't have to think about girls' feelings, about their emotions, and that they just need to really just glorify their own penises. You know, and I think we just really need to just make that point that, you know, when we're talking about porn, it's not just what they're like videos of graphic images, it's all around us. These conversations is everywhere.
Gaming's the other big area. You know, there's like Grand Theft Auto where you have to kill a cop, steal a car, rape a prostitute.
Yeah.
And by the end of the year, there is going to be a new game out called Rape Day.
That's disgusting.
Oh, I just felt every muscle in my body just squeeze so tight when you said that. Oh, my God.
And none of these industries are taking any responsibility of monitoring of what they're putting out. The music industry, it doesn't have any filters. There's, you know, sports clubs in Australia, you know, probably all over the world are rife with their kind of messaging about women, and, you know, denying rape culture. You know, like for me, pornography isn't just a visual YouTube video. It's everywhere. These messages are everywhere.
Yeah.
Holy crap. My mind is blown. Holly, thank you so flipping much for this. I mean, I feel like every time we do an interview, I have to pick my brain up all off the floor because
I know. We both need therapy afterwards and a hot cup of tea. And
thank you so much, Holly.
Well, girls, I really appreciate you both tackling this because mainstream media won't. I write press releases all the time to try and get them to take this seriously, and it's just a topic that nobody wants to talk to. So, you know,
we're making money off it, so it's very sad. But yeah, I mean, Holly, we're the ones that are saying thank you to you because this is the whole point of the podcast, of finding extraordinary women like yourself who have the courage to break these, you know, good girl rules, who are determined and fierce enough to be a voice in this world for all the women and for all the boys, for all the girls out there, for all the men out there who are not using their voice, who are not aware, who've been sucked into all of this gross programming of what sexuality should be, of what sex should be, of what masculinity should be, of what feminism should be. And, you know, we're just so grateful to have someone like you in our community who is making a difference, and a big difference, who's out there, who's stepping up, who's speaking out, and who is creating change. And you are the pillars of society. You know, Holly, you're the person that we should all be celebrating, that we should all be backing, we should all be supporting, and also, you know, also saying, Holly, how can we help? Like, how do we help you to and support you in your messaging? So if you're listening to the podcast, please check out Holly. Her website is www.safe4, as in the number 4, kids.com.au. So www.safeforkids.com.au. She has her books are up there, so you can have a look at the books and buy her books, and please educate yourself and your children. She's on Instagram as well, Safe for Kids. She's also on Twitter. And Holly, you also had something really important we were discussing just before about what parents can do to take action. You were saying that there was a PDF.
Yeah, on my website, on the in the media section, it's a PDF with 26 tips for parents about like just simple things like having a secret family code, and there's just lots of good information there. But at the back of the flyer is if protective education or protective behaviours isn't being taught in children's schools, there's a section that, you know, you could take to your school to, you know, say, here's a place that you can get really good information. And, you know, I know people in other states that I could recommend if because, you know, every state needs to be doing this with the children in their schools.
Yeah, so definitely we'll get that link, that direct link for that PDF, so that people can go onto your website, download that PDF, look at the PDF and take action. If your school is not, like, email your school, ask your parent and teacher committee. If your school is not presenting this information to the children, if it's not a part of their development, use this flyer and, ask your school, get other parents behind you and say that we demand that you provide this for our children.
Definitely. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly Ann Martin. We just absolutely adore you in everything that you're doing. And we just want to say thank you as well on behalf of all the parents out there listening to this and who, surely would be feeling as grateful as what Ashley and I are for the work that you're doing.
You're very welcome. Bye.
Hey, if you want to continue this conversation, head over to our Facebook page and be part of the revolution. You can find us at Good Girls Don't Podcast on Facebook. Please note we cannot create change alone. Your support, likes, comments, shares, and iTunes reviews will help us to give a voice to the insanely inspirational women and the controversial issues that we discuss.
If you'd like to be a part of our podcast, or if you have an issue that you have a burning desire for us to bring into the light, please contact us. With fierceness, Ashley
and Verity.
Get ready for the